Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of my bill, the Foreign Emissions and Non-Attainment Clarification for Economic Stability Act, also known as the FENCES Act. States and communities are being pushed into non-attainment because of pollution that they don't control, that they can't prevent. And as was just mentioned by my colleague from New Jersey who said that we can't control pollution across borders, that's right. And that's why we have to come up with this bill. Smoke from Canadian wildfires, emissions drifting across our southern border or other foreign sources can overwhelm local air quality readings even when the states are fully compliant and acting in good faith. And Congress has long recognized this reality. That is why the Clean Air Act allows states to account for foreign emissions when those emissions interfere with attainment. But that balance was disrupted when EPA guidance under the Biden administration sharply narrowed what counts as foreign emissions, limiting relief to certain human-caused sources while excluding events like wildfires, and that distinction was arbitrary and unworkable. States cannot regulate another country, and they certainly cannot regulate natural disasters. The FENCES Act corrects that mistake. In fact, let me change that phrasing. The FENCES Act corrects that overreach by the previous administration, and it clarifies that all foreign emissions, whether natural or human-caused, must be excluded when the EPA makes non-attainment determinations or reviews new source permits. And just as importantly, the bill allows states to raise these issues earlier in the process rather than years after the planning and investment have happened when the consequences are most severe. And those consequences are significant. Non-attainment designations impose substantial regulatory burdens on states, communities, energy producers, and manufacturers, and they trigger stricter permitting requirements, delay infrastructure projects, and raise the cost for businesses trying to expand or hire. For energy producers, it means slower approvals for drilling and processing, and for manufacturers, it means uncertainty around whether a project will even move forward. For local communities, it means fewer jobs and less investment, even when they have done everything right to comply with the law. And the issue is not theoretical. In my area, the Permian Basin, we saw how even the possibility, the threatening of non-attainment in that designation can create uncertainty. That uncertainty affects permitting timelines, capital planning, and long-term investment decisions for both producers and local communities. Companies begin to question whether new jobs will face delays or additional requirements, and local leaders are left planning around an unclear regulatory future. When the stakes are that high, EPA needs to get the analysis right. That's the way the law was written, and this bill gets us back to that intent. And it was said that this bill favors the dirty production and manufacturing and lowers that air quality. No, it actually holds our communities accountable. It holds them accountable. The communities that we care about domestically that should be held accountable, but shouldn't be penalized for cities in Mexico or wildfires that are happening in Canada or other foreign sources that they don't control. And that's what this bill does. When the Supreme Court decided on the Loper-Bright case, that's the Chevron deferent case, this is the decision they had in mind because the Biden administration overreached so often and so critically. This bill is targeted, common sense measure that does not change air quality standards. In fact, it actually enforces them more accurately within our local communities, and it makes a narrow adjustment to ensure that compliance determinations are fair by excluding foreign emissions from EPA non-attainment designations. American workers and businesses should not face regulatory penalties for pollution originating outside our borders or uncontrollable natural events. I urge my colleagues to think about a common sense solution and to get back to the intent of the law, which is exactly what the FENCES Act does, and I urge my colleagues to vote yes and yield back.